Jack Green, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
There was a study that I recently read which gave a really interesting insight. It said that over half of mental health disorders in athletes emerge before the age of 18. And I think, where are we getting mental health wrong right now?
That's a really interesting stat to begin with. And the first thing that I think of is, surely that's just a general stat anyway, because how many of us, there's lots of us that have our identity of an athlete before 18, but how many of us are professional? Well, that's our full time. Not many. But yeah, where are we getting it wrong? I think there's a big piece around the kind of the division between performance and well-being, the division between mental health and performance. And that's where I'm really passionate, is how do we connect the two? I talk a lot about, thriving personally to thrive professionally, the fact that well-being, your health, and well-being as part of that, your health, is the foundation to then doing more and becoming a high performer, whatever that is, because I also believe that performance is inclusive. I'm a new dad, so me trying to be the best dad I can be is performing. In the same way that trying to win the Olympic Games, I was a performer. Yeah, they're slightly different, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to be better. Therefore, I'm a performer. And I think if we could all start to understand that, and understand then how our mindset leans into that, and how our health contributes to the amount of capacity and so on that we have to go and achieve, we'd start getting better conversations around it, which means that the more we talk about it in a, not a serious in terms of serious in a negative, but serious way of not taking it for granted, that's where we're going to get change. But at the moment, we still see it soft and fluffy, which is the standard well-being conversation, right? Well-being is soft, fluffy, nice to have. Well, it is if you just see it as this one thing in the corner that it's just, here's some services or solutions, rather than a bigger piece, which is our culture and performance.
Yeah, how do you? I think we can hear your daughter in the background having trying to get involved in the podcast, which is so nice to hear. But
is it nice to hear?
Well, you're a new dad, mate. It's such an interesting time for you, and I think that's such a. Is there something that you, as a new dad, that you might be thinking, right? Well, my daughter growing up in the world right now, and whether she goes down a sporting route or not, like that's a different question. What is there an outlook that potentially has changed for you in the way you want to view her upbringing, her mental well-being, and I guess with that generation that are growing up?
I think it's very similar to if you become a coach or a manager or a mentor, is you tend to be the coach you wish you had, or be exactly the coach you had, right? You tend to be one or the other. And in my case, it's like, try and be the person I wish I'd had. So that's no different parenting. It's still coaching, it's still guiding, it's still helping my daughter to grow up and develop. And I was a huge perfectionist as a kid. I couldn't get anything wrong, huge fear of failure, incredibly sensitive because of that, took everything personally. I wouldn't try things unless I was exceptional at them already from the start. So those are kind of environments I want to create with her, where it's just like, just give it a go. Let's see what happens. I think trying has become a really dirty word, particularly in the UK, but all I want my daughter to do is try everything and see what happens. Whereas I was too scared to try because it wasn't very cool and it might lead to failure.
Interesting. And I think you mentioned talking about sort of the fluffiness of mental health, and I think my personal view of it right now is that, and we'll probably talk around the idea of psychological safety as well. Do we fall into a risk of creating too much psychological safety for young people?
Yeah, I think we do that with everyone now. We can go the other way. And the intent tends to be really good, right? So there's nothing wrong with the intent. The intent is, I want to help you and I want to support you. But you also have to understand that people have to go through their own experiences to really learn that they can either overcome that or that they are able to succeed in whatever task they are doing. And I think that's where we get it wrong, is we try and do things for people rather than create the environment and the space for them to do it. So psychological safety can get blurred in terms of just, well, I'm here if you need me and I'm here to help if you ask, to let me do it for you. Now, if I do something for you, you don't learn about it. You don't know how to do it again. You don't know what worked, what didn't. You don't know how it feels. Whereas if I say, here's the environment, here's the safety in terms of I am here, if you need me, then we're just encouraging people to move forward. I think encourage is a really important word in this. So don't do things for people, just encourage them to do it.
I listened to Abigail Schreier, who was recently on Joe Rogan's podcast, and she was talking about her book, Bad Therapy. There were so many interesting points around that, around how we're trying to make our young people happy when we should actually be trying to make them strong, but we're making them neither. And it was so interesting that she spoke around therapy being overprescribed to young people, when actually what the kids were experiencing was everyday life. They were experiencing these bumps in the road. They weren't really experiencing traumatic events, but because they were being told that these events that they were experiencing were so big to them, they then pathologized them and then glorified them in order to be like, well, this is now my identity as someone that faces these challenges and I don't know what to do with them, and it's sort of so overwhelming that I feel we risk missing such a big piece on how we can build strength in our young people by going, yeah, look, the journey is going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be bumps in the road, but do you know what? You're going to make it through. I've got your back. I think if you're a coach, saying those words, I've got your back, is one of the most powerful things, because it doesn't really mean that I'm going to catch you if you fall. It means that I'm going to be right behind you as you go through these challenges, as you go through life. Whereas I think far too many coaches, maybe even parents, go, I'm going to step in front of you and protect you from everything that's in front of you. It's a totally different mindset shift and perspective to how you deal with those challenges.
So two things came up thinking of that there. And the first one is how I coach, and one of my many philosophies, but is I don't stand on the start line when my athletes race. I can't do that bit for them. No matter what, I cannot do that for them. So I have to coach them to be self-sufficient and to be able to deal with adversity, to be smart in terms of knowing why they're doing what they're doing and how to change it and overcome whatever happens during that moment. Because once they're in the arena, I can't do anything. So if I've always done it for them before, or treated them like a child essentially, and said, oh, well, you don't know what you're doing, so I'm going to do it for you, they won't know what to do in competition, therefore they'll lose. Whereas the whole point is to coach yourself to be redundant, in my opinion. My athletes should be able to coach themselves, and I manage them. And I just guide them when, as you said. And I think the key other point of what you said there is that I talk around potential and how I dislike the word typically when you hear it, because typically the people who say you have potential aren't the people who are saying, and I'm here with you. So it puts a lot of pressure on individuals, because you just get media or people who are fleeting visitors in your life saying, you can do great things, your potential is so high, and then they leave. So we just put all this pressure on someone, but we don't support them. Whereas if you are talking about potential properly, it should be, I believe you can do great things, and I'm going to be here with you to help you to get there. That for me is the difference in being able to tell someone they have potential in a positive way or a negative way.
Yeah, I think I spent some time with Paralympic athletes before, and I've had some friends who have been in the Olympics. Actually, a former guest on the show, a guy called Pete Mitchell, we went to school together. He was coming up in the sprint team for basically the London Olympics. Unfortunately, lost his place just before London, but then transitioned over to Paralympics as a pilot rider, and then became world champion, Paralympic silver medalist. And I remember him talking around Paralympic sport and there being conversations. So that this conversation around potential is that I believe you have this, and therefore it's sort of like it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, like you've got potential. I think when you say that word, it does actually lead many athletes to think like, oh, well, I'm the one that's got potential, therefore I take my foot off the gas, and like my potential is just going to be this thing that completely guides me through to the success that you believe I'm going to have. And that was similar to the mindset I was so surprised in seeing with Paralympians, because the perception is that you think they're these kids that are going to run through brick walls, and they've overcome such adversities. And while there are many that are there like that, they have these incredible challenges that they overcome. They've also been told since the age of 10 that they're an inspiration and they have this incredible ability. And he said at the end of the day, like psychologically, they're just the everyday person. They've just got bits that are either missing or slightly impairments. Similar to myself, right? I have my condition, I'm impaired in certain ways, but the belief that I'm just going to allow this to just take me there, this potential and this inspiration is just going to guide me there, it's definitely misguided. And it also links in with the idea that when we pathologize, whether it's our mental state that we're in, whether we believe I'm an anxious athlete or I'm someone who suffers with ADHD, right? I've got many friends that say I suffer with ADHD. It's like, well, you're completely missing the other end of that conversation, which is the superpower that comes from it. So if you've got potential, it's a superpower. If you've got ADHD, it's a superpower. If you've got a condition, it can be a superpower if you allow it to be, or if you allow it to be a speed break, it will 100% be that as well. And it definitely comes to when coaches are telling you such things as potential, you're gifted, you're talented. It's how you then have the perspective of using those words and how you use it moving forward, which really will guide you. It's not actually going, well, okay, this is truth and I'm just going to allow my life to just be seamless from here on.
Well, yeah, you still have to have accountability in everything you do, right? So that's as simple as that. You can't... I could have been potentially one of those. That I worked incredibly hard at what I did, but at the same time, I believed in like my own destiny of, well, I've got this ability, so it's just I'm gonna contribute to it, but it's also gonna just happen because I'm meant to be on that journey. Rather than, I think the more difficulty for me as an individual, as an athlete, when I was told I was going to, capable of being an Olympic champion and so on, is that I expected it to happen and quicker than it potentially could have happened. So I expected it to happen right now. So it put kind of a timeline on me, a ticking time bomb, rather than being like, you could do this one day, but knowing sport, knowing life, there's a journey, there's ups and downs, you might go backwards, you might go sideways. All these experiences you're going to have in your career are going to pretty much give you the experience and the knowledge and then the intelligence to seize the opportunity when it comes. But I saw it as like, because I've got this potential and everyone's telling me I can be Olympic champion, that means I have to do it now.
Did you internalize that as an identity? Did you sort of go, I'm the athlete with potential, I should, maybe even saying things, I should be getting this, that I should be having, and then how did that affect your performance?
In the short term, I was incredibly successful, incredibly quickly, because I just thought, right, well, I'm the best athlete in the world, even though I wasn't at the time. I just thought, well, I'm meant to be and I'm going to be, so off we go, and it's going to happen now. So in the short term aspect, it was fantastic, but it wasn't sustainable because I was living at an intensity, both mentally, emotionally, physically, that was not something that you can continue for a career of 10 plus years. I was living at 100 miles an hour, and if your car goes 100 miles an hour all day, it's gonna break at some point, right? And that's essentially what happened in terms of my mindset. Was got me to the top very quickly, but it was such a brutal mindset that it burnt me out very quickly as well.
But then as you progressed through your career and then eventually retired, what was that period of holding on to the I guess ghost of that potential, or that persona and identity? What was it like losing that? Because this identity change that we have as athletes is actually one of the biggest indicators for suicidal ideation, depression. I don't know if you've seen Will Storr's book Status Game, and he talks about the different statuses that we play as human beings. A fascinating book and some amazing podcasts that he's been on. But one of the biggest indicators for mental health decline, depression, suicidal ideation is massive change in status. Now, there can be different statuses that you have. You can have a sort of success status, you can have virtue status, and from a success point of view, you take an athlete, you're at the very top of your game, and then you say you get injured or you retire, or if you're in a team, you lose your contract, you're traded, whatever it might be. There's an instant, like overnight change in status that you have, and it plummets. And it resonated so much with me, because I've seen athlete after athlete get to the end of their career, have this change in status because they're holding on to this idea, identity, and persona of who they thought they were, and then a new reality changes almost in hours, and they have to grasp this idea of a new identity of who they potentially are or really are right now.
Because we don't see athletes as human beings from both inside sport and outside of sport. And we also typically have old school environments where you are made to feel guilty, or your commitment or dedication is questioned if you have any other interests or hobbies or any other identity other than being the sports person that you are meant to be. And that's a very old school mindset. We're seeing a lot around your career and various pieces. But for me, it was a reasonably, still hard, but reasonably good transition, because I came from a sport that had no money. And, you know, my biggest contract was minimum wage to be top 10 in the world medalist, 4th at Olympics. So I had no choice but to do other work. And that actually really helped me, as well as my mental health experience that helped me to understand I was more than just an athlete. But it really helped me to have other avenues that meant that my success wasn't determined simply by how fast I ran, because that's how I used to be in terms of my self-worth and my value was, if I ran fast or I won the race, I'm a great person. If I didn't, I'm a bad person. Now, when you're winning races, that's what a lovely life to live in, but you don't win them all. And even if you do win them, it's still not fast enough, whatever it might be, because you always move those goalposts. And yeah, but the fact that I was a keynote speaker, the fact I was a mental health ambassador, the fact that I was coaching, I also was working in a gym as well most evenings doing personal training and various other classes. It was kind of like, oh, I've got all these other things that show that I'm more than just Jack Green the athlete. Yes, Jack Green the athlete kind of is the main thing, and it also opens the doors and contributes to the rest. But when I retired, and I retired early at 28 years old, when I was still ready to rumble, I retired, and all I really did was just stop training. I still had everything else, whereas most people go through that experience of like, it's over, and who am I now? I almost had that earlier in my career because I was diagnosed with mental health disorders after the 2012 Olympics when I was 21, and then I ended up taking 18 months out from sport. I almost went through that at a very early age of like, who am I when I'm not an athlete? Which I didn't really figure out at that age, but it helped me on that pathway of discovering, am I more than just Jack Green, the runner, the hurdler, the Olympian, the athlete, which, yeah, obviously I am.
I just had Sam Ward, who's a GB hockey player, come on to the podcast. Sam's a really good guy, and we were talking a lot around injury, and I think injury offers that as a little micro retirement within athletes' lives. And I think about it, I had so many micro retirements in my career. I was injured a fair bit, but I think about some of the time I probably didn't use, and actually how you can be really effective in that time. So this is almost like a little, for any listener, that's like a bit of a tip, I guess, is that if you do have those little micro moments where you do get injured, you've only got a certain amount of time in the day where you can do your rehab, do a bit of training, because you're not at full capacity, right? So it is a bit of an opportunity to really do some introspection, some self-discovery, because I think the end is coming. Like, you have to recognize as an athlete, whether you want to be carried off on the shoulders of your teammates, having won the World Cup and like achieved every greatest possibility you could have ever happened, it's coming. Like that time is coming. And it's, what are you planning for or seeing after the end? Because not everyone's going to reach the heights of the Lionel Messis, the Cristiano Ronaldos, and be able to retire forever, right? It's can you see the chapter that you're currently in, quite literally a chapter in the book that you're writing, which is your life, and be like, right, well, what could I potentially have in the next chapter that would, and can I take from this one and into the new one? And what is it about me that I see that could be common? What is really me? And like you said, what is about my identity wrapped up in this sport, this endeavor, rather than actually who I am?
For me, it's actually simpler and deeper than, don't try and find another career, as I kind of just talked about there. It's not about another career. It's about being comfortable with who you are. Like, am I okay with who I am? And also, it doesn't have to be finding another job. It's a case of, for me, obviously we talked, I'm a dad now, but I'm a partner, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm all these other things that aren't reliant upon success in my workplace or my career. Like, I am those things. Those things aren't changing. So there's a lot of power in that, because that's far more holistic, whole, authentic. And I think that's where we need to, don't keep looking for things to validate you or verify who you are or whatever. You've just got to be comfortable with, this is me. This doesn't mean that you don't have ambition to be more, but this is who I am, and I'm really proud of that, and I'm comfortable with that. And then, therefore, you can kind of be your whole self, and I don't know exactly where I'm going with that, but I just think it's actually simpler than finding another career or something else to hold on to, because you're just then finding the next thing that might potentially fall down.
Yeah, and ultimately you want to have whatever that next thing is, in an ideal world, an expression of a fuller version of yourself, of that person that you are, and how it can, even if it's an accountant, right? If you're going into being an accountant, how can being an accountant express a part of you that you already know about yourself? Having gone through therapy and going through therapies, one thing I love about it is that you are constantly meeting yourself at the door. You're constantly meeting the version of yourself and challenging that version of yourself that you either thought you were, but actually who you really are, and then who you really want to be. And I was fortunate enough we spoke just pre-recording about going out to Hawaii, sort of going into yoga and meditation and educating myself in those areas and qualifying. But the whole process of that, I felt, was shedding this skin of who I thought I was, which was this 6'4" athlete that had played in a very egotistical world, had been brought up in this some way, and then actually burrowing down into like, okay, who is Lewis comfortably when he's around people that don't associate him with this external version of himself? And that can be really challenging for people, especially now, because we're told incessantly online who we should and shouldn't be, and what is good and what is best and what is ideal. And that then goes, well, if I'm not that and I'm me, I'm uncomfortable with that because I'm not this that I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I think it all ties into that. Who are you doing it for? Right? If you're doing it for other people, you'll always be living someone else's expectation or dream or reality. You'll never really be yourself. And I spent most of my life like that, especially in sport, where you are judged and you are measured and you are the comparison is there. So I was never really me when I was, for the first probably 30 years of my life. It's never really me. I was the idea of who I should be or who I could be, rather than just being like, I'm really comfortable with who I am, and it doesn't matter what other people think about that, because I'm not living their life. I'm living mine. That doesn't mean I don't want to do more. I want to be incredibly successful in what I do. I still have ambition to do X, Y, and Z and change the world and so on. But I'm doing it because I want to, and I'm doing it because it's important to me and not anyone else. And that's been a real big shift for me in the last few years, is who are you doing this for? And if the answer isn't you, why are you doing it?
That leads into, as I mentioned before we started, the research that I'm doing around, am I performing on the field based on how I want to perform, or on what the expectation or what I believe the environment is asking me to do? do I believe that there's a certain way in which the coaches, the team want me to perform, or what is perfect, and actually what feels comfortable for me and what feels authentic to me. And if I was to fail at this performance, because I think that's really important, you fail in the way that you want to fail. The biggest resentment I've ever had in some of my performances was failing in doing something that I felt was because of how someone else wanted me to perform or play or be. And that is a resentment that I really don't like, because it's so inauthentic to how I wanted to play the game. Whereas actually, if you go out there, play the way you want to, even if you fail, you can put your head on the pillow and go, I did it my way. That's exactly the way I wanted to do it, rather than living someone else's expectation of how I should play this sport or activity that I'm having.
And you'll never give 100% unless you're doing it for you, right? Whether subconsciously you won't, because you're not able to give all of yourself because you're not fully committed. However, there's a piece that is really interesting what you're saying there, because when you've got an expert or someone that you trust, obviously, we look for best practice, we look for advisors. So it's not to say it's completely wrong, but it's just, where's it coming from? Is that person doing it to help you be your best? Is it part of a bigger picture? And can we win in a team sport? Can we win? There's nothing wrong with exploring those, as long as it's always coming back to what's the reason why. Because you can still, if I have to play a certain role within my team to help us all win, I can get behind that and say, well, actually, because that is something I value and it's true to me, that I want to be able to win as a group and I want to be able to contribute, and I'm going to use my strengths and my skills to help the team and accept that these parts aren't needed. So yeah, I think there's a bigger picture on that too, because you can't just, that's fine if we've all got the experience and the knowledge, which I feel like I'm in a better position now if I was competing to do that. But as a young athlete, I also didn't have that emotional intelligence. I didn't have that experience, that if I did just go in the way that I'd do it, I might not learn as much. So there is a balance. You've got to try things as well to find out actually, who am I and what is right for me and for my future. And you can use other people and you can experiment. So don't just go in stubborn as well and just go, well, this is who I am, so I'm only doing it this way, because you're stopping your ability to learn and develop, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, totally agree. So I've curated some of your posts that I've seen online, and whether it's podcasts that I've heard of you talk before, and I've taken what I believe are some lessons that people can take from those messages, and we're going to go through them here. So first one is having a comfort zone. If you don't have a comfort zone, you won't take risks. If you're less likely to take a risk, if you know you don't have something to go back to. This was really interesting. What do you mean by having a comfort zone?
So this is challenging the saying and just saying, well, let's go into it a bit more detail. Challenging that saying of you can only grow outside of your comfort zone, because it's headline, it's clickbait, because it's kind of like, well, unless you're willing to put yourself out there, you'll never do anything. To a point, yeah. But not everyone is in a privileged position that they can go and do that or feel comfortable to do that. So for me, what I'm talking about here is you will only give 100% and be able to take those really big risks if you know there's someone there to support you. That if you have somewhere to come back to, that there is some form of safety, not complete safety, as we talked about earlier, where someone's doing it for me. That's different, because we do need a little bit of, we had it saying, burn the boats of like, well, there's no choice now, we can only go this way. That's fine when it goes well, but when it doesn't go well and you're left in the wilderness, it's a very dangerous, unhealthy place to be mentally. Whereas if we've got that support of the comfort zone saying, I'm here with you, that's where we're really going to thrive. And it's almost tied to everything we just talked about in identity, in potential. It's the fact that you need more than just this case of, well, I'm just an athlete who is going to be outside of my comfort zone the whole time. Comfort zones are there for you to rest and recover and to recuperate and learn and on what you've just done. You can't just live in the war zone, the competition zone, the fear zone, the fight zone. You can't live there all the time. It's not sustainable. But that's what we're telling people to do when we say, oh yeah, you can only grow outside your comfort zone. It's like, put yourself in a horrible position all the time. Well, that doesn't actually teach us things either. And you're more likely to protect yourself in that environment, so you won't grow as much. Because there is fear, because there is failure, because there is danger. So yeah, there's a little rant on that, and it's because I think I put myself into that place the whole time. I come from old school upbringing and old school sporting environments where that was what I was told to do, and that intensity is very hard to sustain.
Yeah, I think what we spoke around having your back as a coach and having that person's back and being behind them in their pursuit of whatever ambition they have and their challenges, rather than being in front of them doing it for them or even with them. I'm having a couple of athletes that I'm working with that are really interesting around the lack of initiative that they're willing to take, because they've never literally come out of their comfort zone in order to know how to take that initiative to find the answers in which they seek. They're actually waiting for you to show you where it is, to just, and I mean really show you. I think there's the famous quote of a great teacher doesn't tell you what to see, but shows you where to look. And that in it, I find the athletes that I've been working with, they're tuned in, whether it's through parenting, whether it's through school, that they're like, tell me what I need to do. And then I even worked with an athlete last night, and he was performing a skill, and he would turn around and he'd go, was that it? And I go, well, tell me. Like you're the one that it's your skill. I can only tell you what I can tell you some of the things that could help you get there. I don't even know if they're going to work. But he turned around and I said, unless you feel it's a yes, it's a no, right? Because if you're doubting it, then it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good to you. And it's just this lack of initiative to go, do you know what? I'm willing to seek the answer myself, and rather than feel like I'm being given the answer and then I just know. But then in that being given it, you've got absolutely no leg to stand on in figuring out how you even got there, what works, what doesn't work. And I was explaining to them, and my upbringing and sort of my journey to being a pro was hours and hours and hours of just sort of being on my own in a local park in the nets, trying to figure out how I could get the seam position of the ball to be in a certain direction so that I could get it to swing, and just saying to myself certain things, copying certain athletes that I could see on, it wasn't even TikTok or Instagram to even copy. It was like, what can images can I sort of picture in my mind, and can I do that? Watching other people doing it, can I copy that? Hours and hours of just going out there trying to find the answers. And I think a lot of that stems from there being a comfort zone that then they get far too comfortable in, so that they get far too normalized to it. Whereas I think I really like what you're saying, which is take yourself out, but then come back, recover, and be able to then go out again, rather than the idea of that you just are going to stay in your comfort zone or you're just going to stay outside of your comfort zone, because neither are right.
So let's look at it in a really, really simple way of, you're a bird. If you spend the whole time in the nest, you never learn to fly. But then if you leave the nest and you're trying to fly the whole time, you're just going to end up exhausted and broken, right? It's as simple as that. So I've got to have somewhere to come back to, but I can't always be there, right? And I think that's where I do think the saying of leaving your comfort zone to grow is correct, but I think in the way it's been used and the way that the tone we've used and the kind of language we push forward with it has been this all or nothing rather than the smarter piece, which is why I say challenge that. Let's go into it in a bit more detail as to what that actually means, other than it's either I'm either in the comfort zone or I'm out of it. It's like, no, when's the right time to be in what? And what's the reason why?
Athletes are prided on their ability to perform at the highest level, but they're also prided on their ability to recover. They're prided on their nutrition, all of the downtime activities that they do. You get actually, as a high performing athlete, you get nailed if you're doing anything that is outside of high performance activity training. And Pete, again, when he was on the Olympic program, he was talking about how when he was going to Chester Zoo, and this is probably a bit of an insight into GB cycling at the time, but he said he was going to Chester Zoo and he had to call them up to say, can I borrow one of your mobility scooters, because I'm not allowed to walk around Chester Zoo because I'll be on my legs all day. And they actually gave it to him. He said he was so this Olympic athlete's on a mobility scooter with his kids and his then wife, or his now wife, and he was like, yeah, but if anyone needs it, I'll bring it back. But like, please, I just need to be off my legs. And it's they're prided on this downtime, and like it's not like he was running around Chester Zoo and pushing himself to all limits and then going off and performing. It's like, no, he's knowing when he needs to turn it on, which is at training, and then he's got to do it. But that's a very extreme version of that.
And there's also, so this is where you get the art of coaching as well. Art of coaching is so important. It's not just science. So you have to also understand your athletes and understand that there's some things that we can't completely measure. We can't have it's subjective. And be that, do you know what? If I go to Chester Zoo and I'll be on my feet for the next 5-6 hours, but I'll be with my family, we'll have a great time. Guess what? Mentally, how you feel from that, and emotionally and so on, will probably give you more benefit than you not going because you have to sit at home. So it completely blows science out the water. And it's just understanding understand people. Right? And there's some things that we can't really put a number on as such, and that's okay. So I'll give you an example. When I was young, I was that kind of marginal gains, right? And when I first went to train in America, it was like, how many hours can you spend in the sun? How many steps can you walk a day outside of training? All of these things. And it's just so restrictive. Any relationship that has control as like the number one thing is never going to be a great relationship, because you're stopping people being themselves. But I also like a glass of whiskey or being social. And it was like, I remember then learning, if I have this one glass of whiskey, this one small glass, will that stop me from being Olympic champion? And the answer was no, it won't. But will me being able to give myself something a little bit back, be social, have some enjoyment, will that actually benefit me in some way? Yes. Yeah, if I was drinking a bottle a day of whiskey, well, of course, there's going to be an issue there, and not just athletic performance, it's going to be an issue in my life. So it's just understanding, like, you are a human being. Where's the give and where's the take, and where's the benefit that you can get outside of all these numbers that we're obsessed with? Like, life is not just something that can be constantly measured, and sometimes we have to go in the art of coaching. There's the best athlete I've coached, who ended up being world champion, went to her third Olympics, Italian national record holder. The training program I did for her, if anyone saw what I put together for her, even when I looked at it, I was like, what have I done here? It was a program I wouldn't give to any other 100-meter or 200-meter runner, but I learned about her, and I learned what she needed, and she was a thoroughbred, right? She's going to run fast once or twice in a session, and there's no capacity. She's not a workhorse. I was a bit of both, but I was more a workhorse. Put me in the field and I'm going to plough the whole field, right? So I trained her completely differently. If you looked at the science, she'd be like, Jack, you've got this wrong. Yet she ran the fastest time she'd run in 7 years, ran a personal best, and worked with some of the best coaches in the world. And not only because I cared about her as a human being, but because I understood her as an athlete and an individual, and understood what was important for her. But there's a risk to that, because if it hadn't worked, I would have been run over hot coals for it, of like, what have you done here? But I just understood that the human was more important than the athlete.
Yeah, I think there's a risk of many people, especially in the high performance space, is that they fall into, and this leads into morning routines as well, is where we look to optimize rather than maximize. And I think of maximizing rather than optimizing, because if you only think of optimizing and being completely optimal, that is a stressful endeavor in itself. You are constantly looking at, okay, well, if I don't get my 30 minutes of meditation in today, then I'm just going to be completely messed up. If I don't dip in ice bath, if I don't do my gym routine, when actually it's like, no, you can be adaptable. You need to be adaptable. And can you maximize with what you have in front of you? Okay, if you miss something here or there, but like the the stress of trying to be so optimal every day and optimizing everything to the nth degree every day, I think the stress of that far exceeds the having that glass of whiskey and the being sort of just below suboptimal. But when you're on it, you're maximizing everything when you're on it.
Yeah, and everyone's individual as well. So
I just lost you.
Should be here.
No, you're here. Yeah, you're here.
Still here. That's good for a podcast. So what I was saying is everyone's individual as well. So I know some athlete, we talk about balance, but it's more harmony, right? It's some people have a 90% sport, 10% life, and then other people are the other way. We can call them mavericks, and that gets used a lot. And you just have to understand everyone's a bit different and they work in different ways. Whereas I think we try and put everyone in boxes of like, you are this or you are that. So yeah, I think we need to think about that.
One of the keys to becoming successful, asking for help. It's incredible how many people are willing to help you if you just reach out. Most of my life, I have been too scared or too proud to ask for help. I used the word help as a weakness or as defeat. That needing other people meant you're not enough as an individual, or that you were not good enough to achieve what you set out to achieve, when in reality, none of us ever go anywhere without the help of others, whether you ask for it or not. So who are you asking for help from today?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? So that was a recent post. And it's because I'm doing various things in my life now and different ventures and outside of things that I'm well versed in or comfortable with. So I need help from people. And I've always been too proud to ask because of that. It's defeat. It's me admitting that I'm not good enough instead of just accepting like, well, no, I don't know this. I do need help, and that's okay. It's still to the point, I think we all have an element of it. When someone says, oh, have you seen, you know this person? And you naturally want to go, oh, yeah, I know, when you don't. But your natural response is to not admit that you don't know something or that you're weak or that you're, incapable. When really, what's the problem being? Like, how we learn and how we develop and how we grow is by asking questions, asking for help and asking for clarification and knowledge. But yeah, so that's where I think I'm not going to say no to help now, because I know it takes a village to get anywhere. Even though, individual sports person, you would have seen me on a start line and think, oh, it's all Jack. Whether I asked for help or not, there was a whole army of people that had contributed to me being there. So, yeah, take help when it's there and seek it as much as possible, because you don't know everything and you're not the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, I think it's something I've had to recognize as well. And do you know what? It can be hard asking for that help as a coach, because I think you, especially after so there's difference between asking for that help as an athlete and then now asking for that help as a coach, because I think even from the outside, people see you as potentially needing to know the answers. They see you as someone who potentially needs to understand what the answers are, or come from that place of, and then you maybe identify with needing to know the answers and having to know the answers. And therefore that makes asking for the help a little bit more challenging, which is interesting that I've had people like Richard Cheatham, who is in coach development, and we spoke a lot about coaches who, in order to be really elite as a coach, like asking for help and asking and seeking new ways and finding new ways to grow, like that being a massive strength of a coach. If you think of the opposite, coach who is stubborn and stuck in their ways and really not willing to go anywhere, like that is a coach that just is going to stagnate, especially as the whole world is continuously changing almost overnight. So yeah, it's something I've tussled with, and I think especially in the coaching space can be a real challenge. But yeah, it's an ego thing. You park the ego, meet yourself at the door, and meet your ego at the door as well.
Well, if you don't ask for help or seek best practice or learn and develop, you're either saying that you know everything and you're the greatest thing ever, or you're too scared to find out if you're not. So just challenge that. I actually find it easier as a coach, and I respect the coaches the most that And people, right? If I said, "Oh, do you have the answer to this?" and I said, "I don't, but I'll go find it out for you," like that's where you're like, yeah, this person's great. And I went into British Cycling a couple of weeks ago, and obviously they've been through their development in how they can create environments that are better for their athletes. And it's definitely, out of all the environments I've been in, it's definitely the most impressive in terms of their culture and their support and what they're doing. And it's because the main thing I talk about from there was the feedback loops they have with coaches. So a bad coach, in my opinion, just listens to themselves. A good coach will listen to other coaches, people similar to them, and get feedback. A great coach is one that asks their athletes. And that's what they do at British Cycling. They have regular kind of feedback sessions on like, what do you think of the coach and how they're doing, and and how can they improve and so on. And that takes a lot of security. And it also you've got to do a bit of coaching with the athletes in terms of how to deliver that feedback and make sure it's not just this personal attack or whatever it might be. It's actually something that we can work on and progress, because athletes have never really been asked that before. But they're the ones that spend all the time with the coaches, and they're the ones that are the recipient of the coaching. So why wouldn't they be the most important people in that feedback loop? Because they're the ones that experience it. And that blew me away. I've never seen it in any environment yet. It's so simple.
Yeah, that's impressive. I've experienced the opposite to that, really, where coaches not willing to take feedback, where we've done team feedback sessions and the one group that you wanted in that room were the coaches, and they weren't there, and they weren't the other ones receiving it. So yeah, man, that is a huge one.
Athletes get feedback dished out constantly.
Yeah,
that's literally coaching.
Yeah, isn't it wild as well that you get so many coaches that were athletes, and then it changes, and there's almost they're not willing to understand that experience the other end. There are some that are brilliant at it. Many are good at it, but it's wild to think that there's a complete mindset shift. Once I'm coach, again, it's probably this, I've got to be right. Therefore, I know now I'm in I'm in a moment of authority and power.
It's because we create the superior inferiority piece, and we create vertical relationships rather than horizontal ones of, I am in charge and I know better and I am able and I am knowledgeable and you are not, which is why I'm judging you and giving you the feedback and so on. Instead of, we're in this together, you tell me, like, let's work together, let's move. So how I work with my athletes is similar to what you said earlier. I am meant to be the expert, which I'm not, but the expert in the sport or the event. You are the expert in yourself. I don't know you. So you need to tell me about you, and I'll help you with the event and the sport. And together, we'll get somewhere we need to be. So we created this horizontal relationship where they are as important as I am in that, rather than it just being, well, I'm in charge, I am your boss, and this is what you have to do. You've got to be really comfortable and secure. Even when I write programs, I'll write what I think, and then I'll say to my athletes, like, right, let's go through it. What do you think? And I'll challenge them. Sometimes I'm like, no, I really will push for this because I believe this is the best thing for you. But I also then empower them and get their engagement and buy-in at a different level, because they are part of the solution rather than it being told to them. I've got this saying, never do things to people, do it with people. Same in any workplace wellbeing environment that I've been in. It's, don't just say, this is what's going to improve your wellbeing. No, ask them what they want and then figure it out together.
Yeah, I love that. You've heard this before and you'll hear it again, I'm sure, but it's so important. It's easy to get lost in the things we can't control, especially when in a high stress situation. But if you can shift your focus to things you can control, you can concentrate on making them the best. Control the controllable.
That must be an older one. You've done some deep diving on that. So control the controllables is, we all talk about it, we all know about it. It's really hard to do. But I think instead of it, they're looking at it as control, because I think control is an interesting word in our language and how we perceive it. I think it's just like accepting what you can have control over or manage. Like, what's my responsibility and what's not my responsibility? What's my task what's not my task, rather than control. And that's something I've only just started talking about on this podcast because it's not been read back to me. And I think that's actually really important, because control makes us feel like, oh, well, we own it and I've got to everything has to be perfect within that. That's how it feels to me anyway. Whereas, just being like, okay, what's your responsibility? My responsibility is me. It's my lane. It's my training. It's da-da-da-da-da. What's not? Other people. Okay, cool. Let's focus on the thing that's yours then. Let's not focus on the thing that's someone else's or not yours.
I have this really simple equation that I run people through and process, which is when they're faced with a challenge, whether it's some form of anxiety, stress, frustration, anger, and ultimately all of those, essentially anxiety is trying to control something you can't control, but you want to control it. And so I say, right, well, when you're faced with a situation, ask yourself 2 questions. Can I control it? And if the answer to that first question is yes, then great, go take action. Like, you've got something to do. You've got a task. You've got something that is in your control to do, and that won't be stressful because you have control over it. But if the answer is no, then you have to ask the second question, which is, can I accept it? And if the answer is no, then you're going to suffer. That equals suffering, because our inability to accept what we can't control is where suffering is at. And so we have to flex our acceptance muscle and learn to build that acceptance muscle. And I think that can be a really challenging thing for an athlete, because I can't accept that this person was better than me on the day. I can't accept that I lost this today. I can't accept that I wasn't good enough today, that it just didn't work out. And in that process of staying in that suffering spiral, you will forever never get to the place where I can now grow and move to something I can control, because I'm only focusing over here on the thing that is not in my control. And that just tears you apart. It creates resentment, frustration, anger, anxiety, depression, whatever, the list goes on.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I really like that. I came fourth at the Commonwealths in 2018. I missed a medal by 200ths of a second. I missed a silver medal by 700ths of a second. And I celebrated. It's probably the only race I ever celebrated, because it was the first time that I just understood that 3 people just ran faster than me and I couldn't do anything about them. That all I could do on that day was try and execute my race to the best of my ability, which I did. I ran incredibly well. I couldn't have done anything more, I don't think, in that race. And it just happened that 3 people ran faster. The only way that I can do anything about that is by running faster myself, by focusing on myself and the present moment in the things that are my responsibility. One way I've been taught to look at kind of what's your responsibility is who stands to benefit from it. If you don't stand to benefit from it, it's probably not your responsibility. So that's the same in terms of what we were talking about earlier, in terms of like doing things for other people. They're meant to benefit from that action, from that behavior, so it's not yours. So you're not meant to do it. Which is an interesting way of looking at things. Like, who stands to benefit? Me. What's yours then?
Yeah, I like that. That definitely makes sense. Clarity is one of the most important ingredients for high performance. If you lack clarity, it's difficult to know what your next move is, which makes it difficult to perform at your best. If something is clouding your clarity, then do your best to identify those barriers and refocus on what is your main goal. Clarity is key.
And with clarity, you need good communication, but clarity gives you direction. If you don't have direction, it doesn't matter where you go. And then it's just pure fluke whether you get to where actually you're meant to be or want to be. So I think this is a big one around selection in particular. Selection is one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue for athletes, for sports people, is being selected. Now, I'm going to do a LinkedIn post on this so we can talk about it another time, is I don't have to understand your reason in terms of I don't have to accept it, sorry. I don't have to accept your reason in terms of why you thought about that. Oh no, I've got this all wrong. You can tell this is in the moment of building it. Let me do a story instead. It's a better way to do it. When you're in relay teams, the morning of your race, even an Olympic final, you don't get told the team until that morning, right? So you get called into a meeting. Your race is at like 7 p.m. that night to go and win an Olympic medal. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, you all get pulled into a room and they say, this is the team today, bye. And that's it. And you don't get any feedback as to like why you might not be in the team, why you are in the team, what you need to improve upon, so on and so on. So there's no real clarity. There's no real communication in terms of what you need to do, how you can improve. And I used to say, and this is where I'll do it better, and if you need to edit out the last bit, then go for it. But this is where I used to say, like, I just need to know why you've done that and how I can improve upon it. I don't have to like it. I just need to know why. And I think that then brought the clarity for me to be able to have that acceptance muscle and then move forward. And I think that, that's an example from a selection side of things. But yeah, clarity as a whole, it takes away all the noise. It takes away all the distractions and it gives us focus on where we need to go. And then we can make the decisions, the choices we need to make to get there. Whereas, as I said, if you don't have a direction, it doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah, I mean,
you'll get to where you're meant to be, which is nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, even when you think about high-performing moments and clutch moments, the main thing in those clutch moments is clarity. So it comes down to, can I just say one or two things to myself rather than this plethora of thoughts and ideas and distractions and thinking that's going on in my mind? Can I have pure clarity? And actually, clarity requires practice. I think clarity requires consistent practice over and over again, really coaches clarifying their messages, athletes clarifying their actions and their behaviors and their thoughts and being really, really clear on that. And again, it comes down to, and I'll get onto it in a bit, but the idea of not just going too far ahead, being really clear on what is it I need to do right now rather than the 10, 20 things that should be ahead of me right now and where I need to be. It's quite literally clarity is key.
On that one, as a coach, like your athletes can only do 2 or maximum 3 things at a time. They can only think about those. And you should always check for understanding. So it's a case of like, I'll teach one or 2 things, 3 at a max if that athlete is particularly capable or advanced and seen they can handle more than 1 or 2 things at a time. And then before we then go into anything, I'm like, so what are you working on? What are those things we talked about? Just to check. Like, okay, cool. Just reinforcing the fact that I just need you to do 1 or 2 things. And where you see in decision making or the yips or anything like that is because people are thinking about too many things, right? And you lose speed because you don't have clarity. So as you said, in that clutch moment, if you've got 20 decisions in front of you, you lose time because you have to go through all 20 to decide what you're going to do. Whereas if you know it's either this, or simply it's this, bang, we go and execute straight away. And as I say, athletics, sprinting is just biomechanics, right? It's just constant technique, biomechanics. I can look at a million things on an athlete and say, wow, there's loads of things we need to change here. If I tell them all of them, they end up not being able, they're like a baby giraffe because they've forgotten how to run in the first place, instead of going, let's work on this one thing or this second thing, and once we've got that nailed, we'll move on. But having the patience and security and being able to be like, we're just going to do this one thing at the moment, that takes a bit of time to embed.
I found literally in the last 24 hours, I caught myself with an athlete saying the phrase, does that make sense? And I find myself saying it all the time, but it's to get clarity from their side. Did what I say, did what I just said make sense? And I have found that I actually am going to add a little bit more onto it, which is, did that make sense? Yes. Okay, then tell me what I said. And I think when they can teach it back to you, then it's real clarity, because just the phrase like, did that make sense? We're programmed to say like, yep, yes, definitely. And our ego just goes,
isn't it?
Yeah, our ego just goes, yeah, I just need to agree with that because I don't want to look stupid by saying I didn't know what you just said. So I think it opens up the ability for them to, yes, be wrong or maybe make the mistake, but at least you're getting to the end result in the direction you want to and in the way you want to get there. Just the potential price is getting it slightly wrong. You'd rather be wrong once than wrong for a lifetime.
Yeah. I've had it loads of times with athletes where I've seen something and I've gone, maybe this cue will work for them, because everyone's different. And then where I've done speed and biomechanics in multiple sports, cricket included, they all respond to different things. I can't coach them as a track and field athlete because they're not. And the language I use has to be different and so on. And there's loads of times I've been like, actually, I think that's the thing that's going to unlock the big puzzle here. And they'll do it. And I'll watch it and I'll be like, no, I got that wrong. And I'll just say to them, yeah, I got that one wrong. That hasn't worked there, has it? Let's go on to the next thing. But being able to be comfortable enough to be like, I think it's going back to the last thing we talked about as a coach, being able to go, I am not the Messiah. I might have knowledge, but I'm going to get things wrong too. But that also creates an amazing environment where athletes can go, yeah, I got that wrong. Rather than if you're going, well, you're very passionate about this. As a coach, I am perfect and I know everything. Then your athlete feels like they kind of have to do the same thing, and then we create this environment where no one can fail.
It's very easy and feels rewarding to demand more of yourself and others, but more is not always better. Our best measure should be the quality, and during my running and coaching career, I've learned to take away rather than add. This is an underrated skill in my opinion, and is incredibly difficult to feel comfortable with doing. More is not always better.
It's the easiest thing to do, and it's also the safest thing to do, because if something goes wrong and you can go, well, I did all of these many, many things, people go, oh, well, you did everything. Instead of just being like, yeah, well, where's the quality? I can spend 23 hours a day training. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a better athlete because I'm doing too much. And I think understanding that more is always more, not always better, is so important. I learned that working with some of the best coaches in the world, who basically were like, every year of their career, these coaches, athletes were like, I ended up just doing less, but doing it better. Instead of trying to do everything, like when you're young, you're like, oh, and I can do this and I can do that and I'll add in this and I'll add in that. And instead of just kind of reviewing that and going, well, will this actually make me better? Or am I just adding stuff in that then actually takes away from my time recovering or the human side of things? So, yeah, I think it's important, especially because we have a world where we kind of measure everyone on time spent rather than the quality of time spent. So it's like, oh, well, I was in the workplace with contract people from 9 till 5 at minimum. Has anyone ever really worked at a high quality for that long? No. The answer is no. There is no one that has. You do all kinds of things in that time. So that's where I'm kind of like, as long as you do your work and we get the quality, that's all I really care about. I'd rather you're in the workplace and you're in there for an hour working great than being here for 10 hours and absolutely doing next to nothing. So yeah, that's how I'm just like, why do we measure on time instead of quality? Because quality is what helps us win, especially coming from a sprinting background where it's like you're either on or you're off. You either do something well or you don't do it.
Yeah, I've started to think about what can I take out of my life this year. Many people at the start of the year think about adding habits in and what can I add to my life. I've actually thought, well, what can I take away that's getting in the way of me doing the thing and things that mean most to me and that I actually want to seek out and try and achieve. So yeah, more is more. It's not necessarily better. I really liked this next one, which was a post about I had just run a personal best a month out from the Olympics, ranked 6th in the world. I was the best I'd ever been, and I'd never been better than that. That's what the time says. I'd never run faster than that time. I got close on multiple occasions, but if you look at it, I'd been a lesser version of myself for the last 11 years. That's if you believe that. If I measure myself purely on a single moment in time or a single achievement, then that might be the case. But I know there is more than just your career, medals, titles, and pay rises. Since then, I've been better in every single way. I'm not just an athlete. I'm a friend, a partner, a son, a coach, a mentor, an advocate. The list goes on and on. Who you are as a person, how you treat yourself, and how you treat others are far more important than anything else. Do not let one moment define you. You are more than that, and so am I. One moment doesn't define you. I friggin' loved that.
I'm gonna blow my own trumpet there. That was good.
Yeah, mate, I friggin' loved it. Like, I read that and I was like, there's so much that I was like and mainly because I couldn't even empathize with it because I'd never been an Olympic athlete. And I think you guys at the Olympics, where you train for 4 years on rotation and you then go to the Olympics and there's one moment. And if you think about it, like, I instantly thought of someone like, okay, Usain Bolt, right? He has never been better than his world record. Never. Like, he's had 3 moments, right, where he has never been better. But that one moment, he has never been better than that. And this post was just, that one moment doesn't define you. Like, I was, very much behind this one.
Yeah, and it's what we put value on or what we measure success by. And if we measure success by medals, times, so on, I never ran faster than when I was 20 years old. How nuts is that? As I said, I got close. I was 0.1 off it multiple times, 0.1 of a second, which in the grand scheme of life, it's nothing. In the sporting aspect, you're like, oh yeah, 0.1 of a second. But in our day-to-day, how ridiculous. But yeah, I've never been faster. So technically, I was at my peak. I was the very best version of myself when I was 20 years old. I've got a lot of life to live as a failure, essentially, if I view success that way. But after I then went through my mental health issues and so on post that, I'm a much better person than I was then. I'm much more comfortable with myself. I'm a kinder person. I can have empathy. I was brutal and horrible and aggressive because I thought that's how I had to be successful. I'm a father now, all these things, right? And I've actually been, whatever you want to define success, but even in a conventional way, I've been quite successful post my athletic career. Like, there's so many ways to define success. I think success is just like, are you being the best you can be? Are you just trying? Are you, maximizing whatever you've got? Or are you comfortable or accept where you are? All those bits we talked about earlier. Rather than, as you said, that one moment. Imagine if I lived my life now. I would spend every single day as a failure. Every moment I'd be like, well, what's the point? Like, what would be the point? And it's the same way that before I kind of had this realization of defining what is success for me as an individual and beyond, like, what's expected. I used to think I was a failure every single day because I wasn't Olympic champion, because that was my dream. That I lived in this negative world every second of every day, even when I was like the youngest ever European under-23 champion, only teenager to ever win it. Went to my first Olympics at 20, ranked 6th in the world. I still thought I was a failure. I fell in the hurdles in the Olympics, and then I came 4th in the relay. We missed a medal by 0.13 of a second. And I thought it was a failure, even though I was 20 and you're meant to peak when you're between the ages of 28 and 32. And I thought I was a failure. I was ashamed and embarrassed about my performance and myself because I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve one day. Now, what a horrible environment I created for myself to live in, that even when I was doing amazing things that young Jack, when he was 7 years old, was writing stories about possibly achieving and dream. And yet I was going beyond what I was writing as a dream and still going, well, no, it's not good enough. You're a failure. You're not enough. You'll never be enough until you get to here. What a horrible, horrible world. And that's the problem. We tend to create that, see that as the only way to really be a success, instead of, like, you can be comfortable with yourself now. You can accept yourself where you are. You can be enough now and still want to progress and be better. You just accept that this is where I'm at now, and that's okay, because I've done everything I can at this point to be this person I'm here now, and then I'm going to go do more and more because I would like to go and do more. Rather than it just being like, well, you're not Olympic champion, you're a loser, which was my inner monologue for a long time.
And that only depends on those external metrics that people are validating you on, right? Like, and they're good. Look, I think I've read many writers talk around, especially in Olympic sport, how we do need to look after the athletes, and I think sometimes we borderline the message actually moving away from what is so incredible about Olympic athletes. So is the ability to push themselves beyond these limits that the average human being is capable of. However, we have to blend that with the intrinsic value of why we're doing that. So if they're seeking this excellence and these extrinsic motivations, the medals, the success, the wins, right? Those are not guaranteed. And while they're great and they get us out of bed, the well-being downfall comes from I don't really know why I'm doing this other than actually the external, right? And if it's the whole idea of really embracing and enjoying the journey rather than just the destination, it purely is that process. It's, can I actually enjoy the days I'm getting up and training and going to train? And Laura Kenny has just retired, right, as we record this. So she has hung up her boots, I guess.
Cleats.
What you might, the cleats, yeah.
Cleats.
Yeah, so hung up her cleats, and it's, I've given everything I can. I've gone as far as I can. And as well, she said in an interview, I'm no longer enjoying this. I'm no longer enjoying the process of doing that. Like, I don't know why I'm here. And that is someone who has lost the intrinsic motivation of doing the thing that they're doing. And it's important that you have that. If any young athlete is listening, like, yes, redefine your success by having some form of intrinsic motivation alongside it. Like, are you living your values? Are you becoming a character you want to be? Is it building you as a intrinsic person rather than I'm only valuing myself on this medal, this goal, this achievement? Because that is a recipe for failure, even if you achieve it, right? Because it's only fleeting. It's what's next? What's next after that? Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of sadness in, say, if I had become an Olympic champ, or I can do it in case I'm an Olympian, right? So if I still put all my worth in that, it'd be really sad if I spent the next... So last Olympics I went to, I was 24. So if I spent the next 60 years of my life just being like, all my value is what I did when I was 24. Like, yeah, I know the power of it, and I know it can open doors, and I know there's lessons that I've learned, and great, and I can use it, and I'm very proud of it. But why would I want to stay stuck in being 24 in my achievements then and think that there isn't more to life and that I can't be more in just a different way? Whereas you see so many people cling on to that, right? And it is hard because that's we talked about identity, is what I'm known as. Oh, Jack's an Olympian. Sometimes I did it, but I'm not really that anymore. Like, the first thing I respond with is like, well, I'm not quite the man I used to be, if we're talking about it like that, because I'm not. I can't run as fast as I used to. Of course, I don't train every day. But yeah, I think that would be quite a sad existence if you had to hold on to the past to kind of validate the present. And that's the whole thing of I'm not enough now, which I go through at times, 100%, that kind of, sometimes I feel what I do now is inferior to what I used to do. So I'll have this moment. For example, I'll give you an example of it, and it's ridiculous that I felt this way, and I kind of vomited it out. Of a estate agent came round to value the house, and they were like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, well, I work in workplace wellbeing and so on. And because I didn't get the response that I'm used to, when you say, oh, I'm an Olympic athlete or I'm a professional athlete, people go, oh, tell me about it. Oh, that's exciting. What an amazing thing. And because it's like, oh, I work in workplace wellbeing at that time. And they're like, oh, okay. And then I was like, oh, I used to run. And it's like, oh, are you joking? Why do you, oh, we've got a thumbs up on Riverside. We like that. But yeah, how actually... That's just insecurity, that what you are now is not as good as what you used to be, instead of being comfortable with yourself. And that's an example of how I still have to manage that.
I feel that. I 100% have had that before, where you feel like you need to justify who you are, what you're about, by this old life that you had, which seems far more impressive than what you do. I actually feel like I've turned a bit of a corner with that. I'm now becoming more comfortable with what I'm doing now, as opposed to what I was doing. But I think it's also down to the fact that I've spent a lot of time focusing on the characteristics of me as a person rather than just the external. So yeah, I feel you for that. That thumbs up that you get is a thing that MacBooks are doing at the moment. So if there's a setting, if you go onto the top of your MacBook where it's got the green light camera, click it and it says reactions, and you can turn it off. Like, it's so funny seeing people put these thumbs up. So if people watch the videos, like Jack will put a thumbs up and then it will create a thumbs up on it. It's a very strange setting that they've got going on.
Yeah, I'm keeping it. Let's get some let's get some validation every now and then.
Yeah. You cannot be great without being good first. Stop looking for marginal gains.
Oh, this one went big, and I knew it would because I knew it would be a little. I did it on. I don't like to be controversial, but this one was quite a fun one to be like. I genuinely believe it. I believe marginal gains are really important because I work in elite sport. I do not believe marginal gains are really important if you are not doing the foundations anyway. It's the same way we look at every bit of new tech, every tool, every gadget and go, oh yeah, let's get that. Instead of just doing the essential stuff first. It's like, what will make the boat go faster, or what's actually going to be impactful? I could buy this new watch that will record my run. But do you know what will make you run faster? Is if you sleep 8 hours a night, or you eat better, or you do this. Like, don't worry about the watch yet until you get the rest. And that's what the kind of message was. But you get a lot of people just being like, you're going against what British cycling, how they won all their medals and so on. It's like, yes, because British cycling are an elite sport where people are already doing those basic things. But then if you try and apply everything from elite sport to our day-to-day environments, it will not work. Because it's different. Like, we can take lessons from it and apply it and change them and adapt them, but you can't completely transplant sport into day-to-day. Be a very strange world if we all walked around behaving like professional athletes. It's not a world you want to live in, and you know that. I've heard companies or teams being like, yeah, we want to be like a sports team. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, you're not prepared for what a sports team's actually like. You like the good values of it. I completely agree. But that's like marginal gains was, let's focus on the foundations and the bigger parts and the things that will have a bigger impact on you before we go and look at the 1%ers. If you've got 50% to gain, let's get the 50% before we look for the 1.
I think too many young athletes get caught in that trap as well because they see the very, very elite performing, and it's so more visual now. They see it online, right? They can see everyone. They can see LeBron James getting, what was it, 40,000 points that he's on now, and him doing all those amazing things, or any athlete doing their incredible feats that they put and go, okay, well, I need to be training at what they're doing right now. I need to be doing everything. But actually, no, what were they doing when they were in your shoes? What was the time on task that they were doing when it was in your shoes? And I think they get caught up in those marginal, they are marginal gains at the time, but it's they haven't got you can't build marginal gains without a foundation. You're totally right. You have to have that foundation to build the building on.
And then it's really important. But that's where I said I came fourth at the Commonwealth, I missed a medal by 0.02 of a second. I came fourth at the Olympics, I missed a medal by 0.13 of a second. That's where we can start looking at marginal gains and going, well, how do we find that time? But whilst you've still got seconds, minutes, hours to gain, don't worry about the 0.1 till you can get the main bits.
You have thousands of thoughts a day. You say thousands of words a day. Who are most of these thoughts and words directed at? The answer's pretty obvious. You spend most time talking to yourself and you're always living in your own head. It's very easy to be unkind to yourself in your own head. So make sure you're minding your language. Challenge your negative thoughts. Ask yourself if what you're saying is factual. Ask if those thoughts help you. Stop the runaway negative train from spiraling with questions of logic. Don't go immediately from red to green. Spend time with that amber light. You spend more time in your own head than anywhere else. Try and make it a nice place to be. Mind your language.
Yeah, I think this is... You spend all your time in your head and you have most of your conversations with yourself and you create your own reality. And I think the important part of that kind of post there is let's try and bring facts and logic in, because so many of us can create this spiral of thoughts that it's not helpful, it's unkind, it's most importantly, it's untrue. Because we never really question ourselves and like, what's the reality? Like, what's the fact here? So when you're thinking about, I believe this about myself, it's like, well, what's the fact? or I'm in this environment, I don't like it. Okay, well, what's the reality? What can I hold on to and say, well, this is the truth, rather than what's this story I made up? And I particularly struggled with that around my mental health, is I'd spiral, make up these stories around myself or how I was feeling, whatever that might be, instead of just being like, actually, that's not true. You don't have to just listen to yourself. You can question yourself as well.
Yeah, I think that internal dialogue that we have with ourselves is the arsehole in the house that will incessantly follow us around unless we start to give that person rules, learn to understand them, welcome them into the house, give them the rules, tell them how to behave, and they will continue to follow you around, but you at least know how to deal with them a little bit better. And I think that has come from my meditation practice, my practice in mindfulness, just to understand that I'm not going to get rid of this voice in my head. I had an athlete recently reach out to me saying, I've got personal issues going on in my sport right now, and it's impeding my ability to focus. It's impeding my ability to concentrate. I'm getting angry. And I said, look, the reality is those thoughts aren't going to go away. I think if I told you right now, the amount of thoughts that are totally random in our conversation that we're having right now, and in the moment that you're listening to my voice, you almost can't control what's coming into your mind. But what you can control is where you place your attention, what you give time to. So do I want to spend time on those thoughts? Do I want to maybe understand them a little bit more so that I can just let them sit beside me rather than cover me and control me? And I think this idea of our internal dialogue as being something that we potentially could shut off, or even the idea of clearing our minds of thoughts, it's so totally unrealistic and non-existent, because if it does happen, it's only fleeting for a moment. Then you have to make the environment of your mind a much more comfortable place for those to exist. And you only do that by examining it, reflecting and understanding it.
I like the rules. It's you set boundaries for other people, so why wouldn't you set boundaries for yourself? And you only give power and energy to the things that you give power and energy to. And I'll say something that I don't think I've ever talked about publicly, but I've had intrusive thoughts probably every day of my life since I can remember, even when I was a kid. I don't know why. Really intrusive, not very nice thoughts, and from a very young age. But I've just learned that I might always get rid of them, but I can decide what I do about them and what I listen to and how much power I give them. And that might be quite a sad thing to hear, that genuinely as a kid, I can't remember a day where I haven't had an intrusive thought in my life, which is really hard. But I've just learned that they are thoughts, they are not reality, and they are not facts, and to question that and then to decide what reality I want to live in.
And it also doesn't mean that you're going to act upon them. It doesn't mean that you are going. A thought doesn't mean that it's a green light for an action. You could be standing in front of someone, a total stranger, and they're asking you for the directions to the library. And an intrusive thought could come in going, what if I punch this person square in the nose? But it doesn't mean that you are. Like it is that random voice that is just going on in your head. And it's the fact that I appreciate what you've opened up to saying there. And I think many people might listen to it going, oh my God, well, we need to support him. We need to surround him. Like what's going to happen? But if you believe that every thought that you have is an action that you're going to take, like that, you'd be so inundated with things you'd be doing every day because you'd be constantly chopping and changing. Like, just think, anyone who's practiced meditation and just spent 10 minutes of being with themselves is like, if you were to write down every thought that you had in that 10 minutes of meditation, you'd be like, this is the memoirs of a madman. Yeah, it's just wild. Like, you go, who the hell is this? And that's the point, is that you go, well, this is not me. This is not how I logically want to behave. And therefore, like, I have to greet it with some form of humor in some stage and go, well, this is not me thinking or acting this way. This is just a random thought, but actually the ones that really matter, they're over here. This is what I want to focus on. That's what I want to have action to. And I think for an athlete, again, that's where I like taking meditation and mindfulness into performance, is because it's the ability to go, okay, I have these random thoughts and distractions, but actually I'm practicing the art of disseminating between what is really important to me, where I want to place my attention, whether it's just on the breath in the moment. But transferring that skill could be, I need to focus on the ball that is coming down at me at 90 mile an hour. I need to focus on my grip, my technical moments, whatever it might be, my focus points in the game. And that is where you transfer it.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's not like you don't have a choice in life, right? If we just did everything if you live your life just on feelings or thoughts, you're going to be all over the place, and you're not. That's not how life works. You have a choice, and it's your actions and behaviors that create your future, not just your thoughts and your feelings. They're incredibly impulsive and temporary.
Mm-hmm. There was a post that you did, which I loved, which was it was all about one of the final race of your career, how you actually you've not finished the last race of your career, and you were the pacemaker for your friend, 100-meter athlete Guy Learmonth.
Yeah, 800-meter athlete Guy Learmonth. Yeah.
And you wrote, what's the point in getting to the top if you haven't taken anyone with you? Take someone with you.
I think it goes back to that help piece of lots of people helped me, and Guy. So I hadn't retired at that point officially, but I'd taken a break. So my mental health had been really poor. 1 year out from an Olympics, or just before, sorry. And I was like, right, I'm going to take a year out and then come back for the Olympics. So I was still in good shape. I was still doing a bit of training, but I wasn't competing. And then Guy was going for the World Championships that year, and he was 0.1 off qualifying. He had one last race to do, and there was one race down near where I lived, and he said, I need a pacemaker to take me through 400 meters in this time. You're the only person I know who can do that, who's not competing or has other priorities or whatever, and it's local enough I can get there. And I was like, yeah, straight away I just said, yeah, of course I can. And I turned up and I took him through on time. He unfortunately missed the qualifying time by 0.1 again, but I took him through and I tried to help him as best as I could. And I thought that was really cool, actually, that I was actually able to be in a position with all the work that I'd done to be able to help someone try and get to where they want to be. Because so many people had helped me, that it was my way of giving back in a way that I can't do that right now. I'm not physically capable of supporting Guy in that capacity. So I used what I could at the time, and it wasn't about me, it was about someone else. And I think that was quite a big development for me in my journey, because my whole life had just been about me. I'm still incredibly selfish at times, not always in a negative way, but I'm still an individual sports person and an only child. I will still think I'm the star of my show, but I think everyone thinks they're the star of their own show, right? But yeah, it was nice just to give something without... That's the other thing, right? When we talk about help and give us something, I didn't expect anything from Guy. I think paid. I didn't expect anything. Whereas too many times, and the same way that if someone helps me, I immediately like, how can I help you? That's not the way help should be. You give help because you can, not because you expect something back from it. And that's what I did with Guy, was just like, cool, I've got the skills to help you. I'm willing to do that. I don't need anything.
Yeah, it sings to our real need for service to other people. And I mean, what you're doing now is service to other people. But I think for athletes, when you're in the moment, if you can find something that you dedicate bigger than yourself, that can be another person, it can be a cause, it could be a lost loved one, but having that power of dedication and going above and bigger than yourself is a huge motivator, absolutely huge motivator, and so driving for the feel-good chemicals and dopamine and oxytocin that we can have, more than literally anything else could give us, is that beautiful connection that we have with other people. Look, Jack, I've got literally one last one, which is not necessarily one of your posts, but something that I sort of composed coming out with a lot of the lessons that I learned from it. It was something that I recently had been thinking about and wrote, and it was, we often compare ourselves to those at the top of the mountain and we often compare ourselves to those at the top of the mountain and compare to where we are right now. Tell me about where you were, where I am now. Don't tell me about the morning routine you have in the mansion on top of some hill. Tell me about the sacrifices you made. Tell me about the muddy path that you had to scale to get there. Tell me what the view is like on the climb, not at the top of the mountain. I think the reason I wrote this was because a lot of what you've done in your posts and what you're putting out there is not about, this is what, again, it's all been about what we've spoken about today, is not the success, it's not the accolades, it's not the being at the Olympics, it's what it's taken to get there and what the real gritty and ugly parts of sport that actually exist. And there are the glitz and glamour, yes, going to the Olympics, but that is that moment, that is that split second, right? It's not everything. And I think the reality that people must understand is that when people are going for these moments of excellence, that it is not an excellent and beautiful journey all the time to get there. It is back of a fag packet type sort of stuff, and it's ice baths in a wheelie bin. It can be messy, right? And it's muddy, but we only compare ourselves to when we see the athletes at the very end that are at the very top with the glitz and glamour, and we think, well, I'm not there, or I need to be doing that, and compare ourselves to that level at the top of the mountain, than actually trying to figure out, well, where was this athlete at where I am right now? Because that's what I need to worry about. I can't copy what they're doing. I can't mimic what they're doing at the top because I'm not there. I need to find out what it is when they were in my shoes right now. And I think that's what you're doing with a lot of what you're writing about, what you're talking about, is you're giving insight into that journey rather than the destination.
Meet people where they are. Best way to support people, because then you can help individuals. Whereas if you think everyone is where you are, you'll only speak to a very small proportion of them. Meet people where they are. That's why when we look at any tools or so on, we need personalization. We need to be able to find out where people are so we can make it appropriate to them. Same way I talk about keynote speakers. You get a lot of keynote speakers that go onto the circuit because they're successful, and it's basically just like a round of applause where they just go, look at me, I'm great and I'm wonderful and I've won this. But no one learns from you. What's the point in doing it? Like, when I look for a podcast, or I look for a book, or I look for anything, someone to talk with, it's because I want to find out how I can better myself, or how I can help those people I love, care about, I work with. I'm looking for practical advice so that I can be a better version of myself. I'm not looking to find out how you are just wonderful. I want to know how you got to that, and if there's anything that I can apply from where I am at my position in my time in my life. So I think that's just how you connect with people, right? Is you just try and help them, and you give them the tools. And the same way that I won't, when I do keynotes and things, I'm like, I'm not giving you a topic because it's so individual. Because some of you will connect and relate with a certain part of my story, and some of you will connect and relate with another part, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to put it out there in terms of these are the lessons and the experiences I've had. I hope that they might help you, and you might be able to connect with them, especially when talking within workplaces where people aren't Olympians. And I have to really stress that point. I'm just a human being trying to do something well. That's all it was. It just happened to be the thing I was trying to do well put me on a stage, right? Essentially, that meant I can come into this room and talk to you all. When in reality, I'm just a human being like anyone else trying. And yeah, that's where we can hopefully then make sure that those experiences and those just experiences relate. So I think it's so important. Think about other people and what you're giving to them. People want practical advice because they want to help themselves and help the people they love.
What's your view on this new doping Olympics that's coming in? The idea
joke,
of that,
isn't it?
Yeah. What's your view on this doping Olympics?
It's unsafe. That's the main thing. Do you want people to die? It's unsafe. Simple as that. It's a very dangerous act, and also it's a case of why can't we be enough trying to push ourselves within the boundaries we've set that are safe to a degree. Sport's already brutal. Like, you're already doing things that are not particularly healthy. Like, sport isn't healthy. Exercise is healthy. Sport is not. So then why would we want to take it to that next next level? Why do we want at the end of each championships to be like doing memorial services for people passing away at the ages of young ages because of just all these drugs and the levels we're pushing to? Yeah, because the thing is, it's not like it's like, okay, now here's the boundary where we all will take this amount of whatever it might be, so we're all then level playing field. It then just becomes like F1 racing for human beings, where we're just trying to go to the next level, which then means someone is always going to go too far. Which is why we get people who already fail drugs tests, right? But they don't do it to the point that they might pass away, might die at an early age, or have real long-term implications for their health, which we already have, but not at that extreme. So yeah, I just think it's incredibly unsafe and it's incredibly stupid.
Have you heard about what's going on over in Japan and Korea with cycling? They've just launched, or they're in the process of launching, a brand new competition where it's essentially I think a franchise tournament and league where athletes are going to be going out there and they are being given huge sums of money to race, and it's opening up the betting and essentially using them to create betting around and a league around these athletes. And so there's athletes that have been ex-GB athletes that are now getting back into training, and they're going out there because the money that they can earn in one weekend will almost be what they could have earned in an entire year as an athlete. And if they win, it's even more. And that's going to be some form of a tournament that's ongoing. And it's been a really interesting idea to consider, because one, I've recognized that athletics doesn't financially support athletes to a huge extent. And this opportunity offers some doors for them to really create some security in that sense. But at the same time, the concept of it, I think, dehumanizes the athletes, is that it turns them into these almost like horses. The way I instantly thought about it was like horse racing. And I was very, very interested as to whether that may start to happen even on the athletics track, whether we might start to see these sort of maybe Saudi, whether it's Korean or Japanese breakaway organizations and competitions that happen that are used for revenue generating, but are based on, yes, the performance of the athletes, but have sort of this, I guess you could say, insidious look into them, or whether it's not insidious, it's just an opportunity for people to spectate and maybe bet some money on it as well.
Just sounds like a load of insecurity. If you want to make money, it's not the world you do it in. Anyway, you can make a lot more money doing other things. Anyway, that don't require that. And also, when we talk about this doping Olympics, whatever they're calling it, do realise people aren't going to compete better than the actual professional athletes out there, because until you get all the best athletes in the world over to do it, like you're getting, I'm the kind of person they'll probably ring and be like, Jack, you're 32. I've been retired 4 years. I'm broken in so many ways. And drugs don't just suddenly make you go, oh, I'm a great athlete. Like they allow you to do more and to train harder and to recover quicker and whatever. It takes time. It's like, not that I know a huge amount about it, right? But that's the reality, is people aren't going to, you get these people, I'm coming out of retirement. Well, yeah, well, you're done. Like, you're not going to come and suddenly run a world record. Like, that's not how this works. So it's not going to be any better anyway, because what people are expecting and why there's PR and media around it is because it's like, oh, well, I'd rather watch someone run 5 seconds for 100 meters than 9.58. It's like, yeah, well, that won't happen. So it's just going to be a wet fish, really.
The people that are running it and talking about it have a complete misconception of what Olympic and high performance athletics is like. I remember going into a GB swim environment, and I remember speaking to one of the coaches, and I said, "What sort of athletes do you look for?" And he said, "Well, if they're anything below 6'3", we wouldn't consider them." I said, well, "Okay, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I cannot physically train someone below 6'3" to outswim someone who is 6'7" with a wingspan or a few inches bigger. Like, I cannot get them to rotate their arms fast enough to beat that sort of physical attribute. And when you realise that there is an element of, yes, dedication, athletic ability, and all of the training and all of the 1%ers that go into it, there is a genetic component that goes to it. Usain Bolt, who is standing there at 6'6" compared to some of his counterparts, if he, by pure physiology and biomechanics, if he moves his arms and legs at the same speed as someone who is 5'9", like, he is going to move a bigger distance because everything is bigger. He's got bigger stride length. But if he can move them at the same pace, if he can do that, that's fine. And I think you're right. I think people just believe that to go into high level athletics, to go into it, it's just all work ethic and it's all this and it's all of that's it. So if I just add steroids in, I'm going to be a complete athlete.
The fact is, there are athletes who dope, who fail tests, and they don't win everything.
That's so true.
So there's clean athletes winning. So it's not just a given, because there's so much more to it. Dwayne Chambers, who I was on teams with, and obviously very public in terms of his doping incident that he had. When you read his book, like, when he was doping, he only improved by, like, I'll get this wrong, I'll butcher it, but less than 0.1 of a second in a year when he was 20 years old or 21 years old, where he probably would have improved by that anyway, just because of training, and at that age you do. So there's not like a guarantee. Otherwise, we'd see that every single athlete that fails a doping test would then become the best, and they're not. So it's just media. It's just PR. That's all it is. Media outlets picked it up because it gets conversations. It's controversial. Whereas if no one picked it up, no one would care.
Yeah, look, we get in the weeds of it. But Jack, look, I've been really appreciative of your time. I realise you've got lunch to go and do with your daughter, your new daughter.
Which will be fun.
I always finish off this podcast with asking if there's anything that you're reading, listening, watching at the moment that's currently inspiring you that you would recommend to listeners.
I have reread recently The Courage to be Disliked, which is probably why I'm talking about harmony and tasks and so on.
Makes total sense with a couple of things that were popping up there with the horizontal and vertical relationships.
It's like the third time I've read it over quite a few years, and it really helps. There's lots in it that you can apply and whatever. That's the thing with psychology and philosophies, is they're not completely right, but there's lots in there that's powerful. So yeah.
And the last one is always, if there was anything from our conversation today that you would leave listeners with a challenge, what challenge would that be?
I've got to think back to all the rants and the rambles now. That's the problem.
There's some good stuff in there.
Well, I'll ask you then. Was there anything in particular from that you were like, cool, that's something I'd take?
I think if there's the one that I think, there's a couple really for me, is don't let one moment define you. I think don't let one moment define you, and that can be taken in so many different ways. If you allow one moment to define you, then that could easily stop you from trying for the next thing and realizing that this one moment, this one game, this one match that I've had is completely defines me as a human being. But also from the element that it doesn't define you. There's so much that you can take from that. And really, like, this conversation has been mostly built around mental health, and a lot of your work is around mental health. And I'm a big believer that if you can take control of what is really in your control and start to disseminate and to understand what is not in your control and what is in your control, I think you just spending a year on that concept, you will find that your life could completely and drastically change, and those around you. So those are a couple of things that I would challenge people to take. But
no, that's given me time to think now. So thanks. It was nice delay tactic. The thing that I'm going to say is, you are enough as you are, but you're also more than you realise. That's what I'm going to take from that. So you are enough as you are, but you are more, in terms of identity, you're more than you realise you are.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I've played around with that before, and I challenged myself with that because I believe the idea of saying you're enough as you are could be quite damaging to people that believe that they're really struggling right now. But I think that adding that bit on there, that you could be more than you realise, is really what people, I think, need to be hearing, because it's, okay, you're worthy enough to have a crack, right? But you're not going to feel worthy enough unless you start doing something about it. Like, because you only feel worthy just through the fact that you have some sort of undeniable proof of, like, yes, I've done this. So I remember listening to someone talk about, like, well, okay, if you want to be a motivational speaker, like, your credibility of being a motivational speaker is not in how you speak, what you do. It's actually in what you've done. Like, show me the credibility of how you can be motivational. Now, you're a motivational speaker because you have this motivating story. I'm confident in being a motivational speaker because I have my story, right? And it's you can have all these different things, but until you actually say, okay, I'm going out there and doing the thing that is going to motivate people, like, that brings me the worth. That's where I go, okay, I'm worthy enough to have a crack at this. And I've, it's an interesting one that I've been playing around with over the last year or so, is that because I've spent a lot of time in the yoga space, right? And there's so many people there that go to yoga at times of need, and they go to therapies, or they go to real therapeutic practices at real dark times of need. And a lot of the rhetoric around it is like, you are just enough the way you are. And it's like, well, I'm frigging miserable right now. Like, please don't tell me I'm good enough as I am, because I feel hopeless. It's like, well, no, okay, right now you feel hopeless, but actually you have the ability to be so much better. And if you can start to move yourself in a direction towards that, like, that's where you'll start to feel pride in yourself.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think it's not about your current emotion or feeling or thought. It's the fact that you've got everything you need. You've got the tools, whatever tools you've been given, that's enough. And you have the not potential, the capability. So it's being comfortable with yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And then the piece on identity, what I wanted to say under the more than, is because you're more than whatever your career or hobby or whatever you attach your identity to.
Yeah.
And so many of us don't realise that there is more to us. And we all have more to us than we realise, whether we thought about it or not.
Yeah. Jack, look, this has been an absolutely phenomenal episode. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Where is the best place for us to send people to follow more of what you're doing, what you're up to? We were talking about you potentially writing a book right now, and a startup as well that's coming. So where can people follow you, get involved, just catch up and stay in tune with what you're up to?
I'm only on LinkedIn, so you'll find me on there. I deleted everything else when I retired. So yeah, only on LinkedIn. That's a whole nother story. Only on LinkedIn. But I'm very active on there just because business. Yeah, for sure. I'll put links in the show notes, and I guess just giving people a little bit of an insight into what the book's going to be about and the startup that you've got coming up. Yeah, so the book is something that's been in the works since 2017 and not always had the courage to put it out there. Been a bit anxious at times about other people's expectations or thoughts or opinions, when the whole point is to help people. So the book is basically that practical piece, like, what are some of the lessons I've learned that I apply, particularly around mindset, that might help you. Simple as that. Some of you might look at 10 of those lessons and go, oh, 10 are great. Or you'll look at one and go, that's the only one I think is good, but it might help you. So, and then in terms of a startup, it's basically going back into the world of sports and how do we drive human performance and really value the potential that people have outside of just their sport, but bring insight and awareness to sports teams and coaches, organizations, as to the potential stresses that might be impacting performance, be it mental health, financial well-being, relationships with friends and family, opinion on culture, leadership. Yeah, just bringing the whole picture to sport rather than just the athlete. Amazing. Look, thank you once again. This has been phenomenal, and I really appreciate your time. Nice one. Thank you very much.